We're joined now by Senator Tom Cotton, who is in Dardanelle, Arkansas, at his family farm. Welcome, Senator. I wanted to ask you first about this $400 million payment the United States made to Iran. You say it's a ransom. The administration says that it's money that Iran was owed for a dispute that goes all the way back to 1979. So was it a ransom or a swap, and why does the difference matter?
John, I said at the time in January when the president announced that he was paying $1.7 billion that was a ransom payment. But we've learned in the last week that $400 million of that payment was in euros and Swiss francs, the kind of money that is favored by drug cartels and terrorists and third world gun runners all around the world. It was put in an unmarked cargo plane and flown to Iran the very day that those 4 American hostages were released and that the nuclear deal was implemented. One of those hostages has said that they were delayed at the airport before they could take off, and they were told by Iranian officials at the time that they couldn't take off until another plane landed. So it's clear, I think, to every reasonable observer that the $400 million that day and the remainder of the $1.7 billion was in fact a ransom. It doesn't really matter what Barack Obama says. It matters what the Ayatollahs think and what every dictator and terrorist and gangster around the world think. And they all clearly believe, in their own words, that this was a ransom payment. And that means that they're going to take more American hostages, which is exactly what Iran has done since January.
So it's bad policy in that you say it might encourage more hostage taking. What about illegality? Do you think that because there were sanctions in place, that the president says the reason the money had to be sent that way is because you couldn't just send a wire transfer into Iran? So there were barriers in place. Do you think anything was done that's illegal here?
Well, lawyers disagree about whether the transfer of this cash was legal or illegal, but I think it was deeply unwise. The president said at his press conference this week that the United States doesn't pay ransom for the exact reason that it encourages the taking of more hostages. But when the United States government acts like a drug cartel, when they take 500 euro notes, which is so much the preferred bill for terrorists and gangsters and drug runners all around the world, that the European Union is putting it out of circulation, and then they fly that in an unmarked airplane into Iran the day that hostages are released, of course that's a ransom. And of course it's going to encourage Iran and other countries and other organizations to take more Americans hostage, which is exactly what Iran has done since January, taking 2 more American citizens hostage.
Can you do anything to stop this president or any other president from doing that kind of thing in the future?
Well, the $1.7 billion apparently has already been paid in full. Hopefully the president will no longer negotiate with the Iranian regime over American hostages and will not pay them anything further. I've introduced legislation with other senators from both parties, like Bob Corker and Bob Menendez and Joe Manchin, called the Countering Iranian Threats Act, specifically to clamp down on a lot of Iran's nefarious activity throughout the region. But fundamentally, we have to recognize that Iran is not a partner. The nuclear deal with Iran is fundamentally flawed. They violated the terms of those deals. And according to the president's own director of national intelligence, his own commanding general in the Middle East, Iran has gotten more aggressive since that deal was consummated, not less aggressive.
What would you hope that Donald Trump, if he were elected, would do in Iran?
Well, what we need to do is to walk away from the Iranian nuclear deal. Fundamentally, the objection that I had at the time and so many others is not that Iran was going to cheat on the deal, although they have been cheating, that even if they upheld the terms of that deal, it would still put them on the path to a nuclear weapon in 10 to 15 years, which is the blink of an eye in the life of the nation. To give you a sense of scale, North Korea entered a similar agreement with the United States in 1994. Just 12 years later, they detonated their first nuclear device, and now we're living with the consequences. So the United States needs to walk away from the deal, which Iran is not upholding anyway. We need to put real sanctions back in place. We need to force Iran to dismantle its nuclear program entirely or face the threat of military force to destroy that program.
And Iran announced today that they executed a scientist who they believe helped the United States reveal news about its nuclear program. Let me ask you about Donald Trump as president. Have you gotten more or less confident in his job and ability to handle the commander-in-chief position since you endorsed him?
Well, John, I know the media is obsessed with Donald Trump. I'm not going to respond to every single thing that Donald Trump has to say or that Hillary Clinton says. I'm not going to follow the back and forth in the campaign trail. What's ultimately going to matter in the long term is not who won or lost a week in the campaign, but whether the American people are safe. You mentioned the Iranian scientist that was recently executed. Now, of course, I'm not going to comment on what he may or may not have done for the United States government, but in the emails that were on Hillary Clinton's private server, there were conversations among her senior advisors about this gentleman. That goes to show just how reckless and careless her decisions was to put that kind of highly classified information on a private server. But I think her judgment is not suited to keep this country safe.
Okay, that's on her judgment. But since Donald Trump is the nominee of your party and you spoke at the convention about him, you said help is on the way. When in the future, if Donald Trump is in the office of the presidency, do you think he has the temperament to handle those lonely decisions that a president makes?
John, I'm confident if the American people elect Donald Trump and they elect a Republican president, that America will be safer and stronger in the world, our streets will be safer, and our country will be more prosperous.
You said elect a Republican president. You mean elect a Republican Congress. Do you think the Congress will help keep him in check?
John, the Congress plays an essential role in our constitutional structure. For instance, Donald Trump is not the first person to question the wisdom of keeping troops in South Korea. Jimmy Carter did that. In fact, Jimmy Carter wanted to withdraw troops from South Korea, but it was the Congress, members of both parties, who stopped that from happening. And that's exactly the kind of thing that I will focus on doing in the future, regardless who is president, because the people of Arkansas elected me to go to Washington to keep this country safe and make it more prosperous.
All right, Senator Tom Cotton, we thank you for being with us, and we'll be back in 1 moment.